Hi everyone, thank you for joining me for another edition of our Grown Up Storytime. Today we are reading part 2 of The $1 Million Bond Robbery by Agatha Christie, featuring Hercule Poirot. If you want to watch part 1, you can just scroll down the page a little bit and you'll find it. I've also included a synopsis in this description of the video. And I hope you'll all join me next week, starting Monday at 8 p.m. We'll be coming to you live every day at 8 o'clock p.m. for a special grown-up story time where we'll be reading The Langoliers by Stephen King. And we're very excited because we received special permission from Stephen King himself to read this. But because of copyright issues that we have to respect, we can only keep those videos up for a very short amount of time, less than 24 hours. So I hope that you'll join us live. Again, that's every weeknight starting this upcoming Monday at 8 o'clock p.m. So we hope you'll join us then, and without further ado, let's get started with part 2 of The $1 Million Bond Robbery. The little man puffed out his chest and sighed so comically that I was forced to laugh. Tuesday saw us speeding to Liverpool in a first-class carriage of the L&N WR. Poirot had obstinately refused to enlighten me as to his suspicions or certainties. He contented himself with expressing surprise that I, too, was not equally au fait with the situation. I disdained to argue and entrenched my curiosity behind a rampart of pretended indifference. Once arrived at the quay alongside which the big transatlantic liner, Poirot became brisk and alert. Our proceedings consisted in interviewing 4 successive stewards and inquiring after a friend of Poirot's who had crossed to New York on the 23rd. An elderly gentleman wearing glasses, a great invalid, hardly moved out of his cabin. The description appeared to tally with one Mr. Ventnor, who had occupied cabin C24, which was next to that of Philip Ridgway. Although unable to see how Poirot had deduced Mr. Ventnor's existence and personal appearance, I was keenly excited. "Tell me," I cried, "was this gentleman one of the first to land when you got to New York?" The steward shook his head. "No, indeed, sir, he was one of the last off the boat." I retired crestfallen and observed Poirot grinning at me. He thanked the steward, a note changed hands, and we took our departure. "It's all very well," I remarked heatedly, "but that last answer must have damped your precious theory. Grin as you please." "As usual, you see nothing, Hastings. The last answer is, on the contrary, the coping stone of my theory." I flung my hands up in despair. "I give up." When we were in the train, speeding towards London, Poirot wrote busily for a few minutes, sealing up the result in an envelope. "This is for the good Inspector McNeil. We will leave it at Scotland Yard in passing, and then to the Rendezvous restaurant, where I have asked Miss Esme Farquhar to do us the honor of dining with us." "What about Ridgway?" "What about him?" asked Poirot with a twinkle. "Why, you surely don't think—" "You can't. The habit of incoherence is growing upon you, Hastings. As a matter of fact, I did think. If Ridgway had been the thief, which was perfectly possible, the case would have been charming, a piece of neat methodical work. But not so charming for Miss Farquhar. Possibly you are right. Therefore, all is for the best. Now, Hastings, let us review the case. I can see that you are dying to do so. The sealed package is removed from the trunk and vanishes, as Miss Farquhar puts it, into thin air. We will dismiss the thin air theory, which is not practicable at the present stage of science, and consider what is likely to have become of it. Everyone asserts the incredibility of its being smuggled ashore. Yes, but we know. You may know, Hastings, I do not. I take the view that since it seemed incredible, it was incredible. 2 possibilities remain. It was hidden on board, also rather difficult, or it was thrown overboard. With a cork on it, do you mean? Without a cork. I stared. But if the bonds were thrown overboard, they couldn't have been sold in New York. I admire your logical mind, Hastings. The bonds were sold in New York, and therefore they were not thrown overboard. You see where that leads us? Where we were when we started. If the package was thrown overboard, the bonds were sold in New York. The package could not have contained the bonds. Is there any evidence that the package did contain the bonds? Remember, Mr. Ridgway never opened it from the time it was placed in his hands in London. Yes, but then... Poirot waved an impatient hand. Permit me to continue. The last moment that the bonds are seen as bonds is in the office of the London and Scottish Bank on the morning of the 23rd. They reappear in New York half an hour after the Olympia gets in, and according to one man whom nobody listens to, actually before she gets in. Supposing, then, that they have never been on the Olympia at all. Is there any other way they could have got to New York? Yes. The Gigantic leaves Southampton on the same day as the Olympia, and she holds the record for the Atlantic. Mailed by the Gigantic, the bonds would be in New York the day before the Olympia arrived. All is clear. The case begins to explain itself. The sealed packet is only a dummy, and the moment of its substitution must be in the office in the bank. It would be an easy matter for any of the three men present to have prepared a duplicate package which could be substituted for the genuine one. Très bien, the bonds are mailed to a confederate in New York with instructions to sell as soon as the Olympia is in. But someone must travel on the Olympia to engineer the supposed moment of the robbery. But why? Because if Ridgway merely opens the package and finds it a dummy, suspicion flies at once to London. No, the man on board in the cabin next door does his work, pretends to force the lock in an obvious manner so as to draw immediate attention to the theft, really unlocks the trunk with a duplicate key, throws the package overboard, and waits until the last to leave the boat. Naturally, he wears glasses to conceal his eyes and is an invalid, since he does not want to run the risk of meeting Ridgway. He steps ashore in New York and returns by the first boat available. But which was he? The man who had a duplicate key, the man who ordered the lock, the man who has not been severely ill with bronchitis at his home in the country. Enfin, that stodgy old man, Mr. Shaw. There are criminals in high places sometimes, my friend. Ah, here we are, mademoiselle. Here we are. Mademoiselle, I have succeeded. You permit? And beaming, Poirot kissed the astonished girl lightly on either cheek. And that is the end of part 2 of the $1 Million Bond Robbery. I know that one was rather short, but I hope you enjoyed it, and I really hope that you will join us at 8 p.m. on Monday for our special grown-up story time, because I think it'll be a lot of fun and you'll really enjoy it. And as always, stay safe, stay home, and stay calm. Good night.